Hi everyone, you all know me as Sappho, and I wanted to make a video about coming out. Coming out with anything can be very difficult, especially if it's something that society currently views with disgust or is a bit dangerous to even come out with the way that things are right now. And it's a lot like when homosexuals were coming out in the 1960s during Stonewall and those sorts of events. And I know that 99% of my viewers, my community, you don't have anything wrong with homosexuals or gay people. You support them, you support LGBT, nothing against them. But I guarantee that many of you, even if you can't imagine it now, if you were growing up in the 1960s and were being fed all of the news and social propaganda about how gay people should stay in the closet, how it's unnatural and against nature, and all sorts of crazy shit like that, a lot of you would probably be anti gay, anti LGBT. And that's just how it is. And I respect you all. And frankly, this sort of thing would have leaked out eventually, especially with how cancel culture is these days and other furry drama. There would be people out there that, they want to have a gotcha moment. They want to build their fame and popularity and, expose people. And I'm just not going to give the opportunity for a sappho exposed kind of video. And I would rather suck the air out of the sails of the rant sonas, and instead of letting this sort of thing build, just be open and honest about myself and my beliefs. And I want to clear the air and say that, for the record, I am a zoophile. You did not mishear that. I am a zoophile. I do not have a thing for humans. I am more attracted to dogs like German Shepherds. If you are willing to stay and listen to my view and explanation, that is the point of this video. It is to show that there are ethical guidelines. It's not so black and white like many furries think that it is, and a full explanation as to the way that I think and the way that others think and why. Zoophilia is often very misunderstood, especially because of certain very terrible people and what you may have seen in the news. And someone that I will not mention, if you remember that situation with the zoo sadism leaks a few years back. Unfortunately, when people think of zoophiles, especially furries, that's the person that comes to mind. That is the situation that comes to mind. And I'm talking about horrible abuses. And I'm not accusing a certain individual of anything here, but those leaks showed some truly horrendous people doing awful things to puppies, dead animals, animal gore, and other atrocities that I really wish would have been prosecuted, but unfortunately most could not, either by legal technicalities or so on. And it's a really sore thing for me because I would have liked to have seen justice in that case, I really would have liked to see that justice. But just because somebody was not charged or prosecuted does not mean that they were not guilty of what those videos showed and what those logs showed. And I will leave it at that. I couldn't imagine somebody doing that sort of shit to my animals, my mate, my... just... I can't imagine who would harm another living being in those ways. And to be 100% clear, I am not like that. Most of the zoo community is also not like that and utterly despises it. People who force animals into situations they don't want, physically and through other means, are completely deplorable and seen as rapists. Playing with an animal that is not sexually mature is like the equivalent of pedophilia, and it's treated as such. I do not support those people, and they do not deserve the same title. They're fetishists and bestialists. I do not want them to be the face of the community, and they should not be the face of the community. It's like literal Nazis considering themselves furries in the fandom. You don't want them. We don't want them. We don't want that image to be what people think about. Ethical zoos are not like that. Zoophiles are among the most caring and loving people towards animals and their mates. We see animals as equals to humans, not as property or an object like in the eyes of the law and others. Specifically, I and other ethical zoos follow what's called Zeta principles. Zeta being the Greek symbol, but also standing for zoophiles' engagement, for tolerance and acceptance. So if you see that symbol on a furry, that's probably what they're referring to, or they're an ally towards that kind of cause. And those principles are: bestow upon animals the same kindness one would wish bestowed upon oneself. Consider the well-being of an animal companion as important as one's own. Place the animal's will and well-being ahead of one's desires for sexual gratification. Teach those who seek knowledge about zoophilia and bestiality without promoting it. Discourage the practice of bestiality in the presence of fetish seekers. Censor sexual exploitation of animals for the purpose of financial gain, and censor those who practice and promote animal sexual abuse. Zoophiles are not the same as bestialists and fetishists who do not follow those principles. Hypothetically speaking, I would see my partner or my mate as an equal to myself. Everything would be out of love, care, and affection for their wellness and well-being. It would not be to serve myself and my desires. And a lot of people have issues with this sort of thing, which is understandable. I can understand the point of view that others have about my views. The biggest argument, of course, that comes up is about consent and what is that like, right? And they want to compare like apples to oranges. They want to compare a grown, adult, sexually mature animal to like a toddler, basically. Comparing apples to oranges. And in my opinion, it's a bad faith argument. I don't think you can compare a sexually mature animal to a not sexually mature human. I think it's bad faith. But back to that hypothetical, and my view on it is that if my mate came up to me, loved me, and wanted something more in that moment, why would I deny them that need? I want to care for their well-being and help them feel good. At the same time, if the animal is uncomfortable or walks away, that's a no. That's a do not continue. That's a I do not consent. I have a really close zoo friend that can explain more in a non-hypothetical way in the second half of this video. And this friend has a female German Shepherd mate and considers her to be the love of his life. And why am I like this? Well, we can speculate on that. I have always loved animals in this kind of way. Even back when I was 11, that would probably be the earliest that I remember, I always found comfort and love in animals. I would lie down with them for hours, sleep cuddled up with them, and never treat myself as any better. My 2 golden retrievers at the time were my place of safety and comfort. And no, I did not do anything sexual with them. It was something that later on I had always thought about, but I was so ashamed for so long about being the way that I am. It caused a lot of mental pain and turmoil. And yes. But recently, after discovering there's other people with similar feelings to me and ideals, it has inspired me enough to have this message. And that would include online resources like the Zooier Than Thou podcast and some other people that I've met through some internet forums. And really what I want to do is to educate people about what it means specifically to be a zoophile, and that there are shades of gray, not this black and white evil nonsense, comparing someone like me to a freak that forces themselves onto animals and commits horrendous animal abuse. This is to have a personal conversation with my community, furries, zoophiles, and others, and I am more than happy to answer questions or be interviewed in a neutral manner. With that out of the way, I'm going to switch to more of a podcast-style video. I'm just going to start recording, and cool. So, it's really good to have you here. It's good to be talking again. And
it's my honor to be your guest.
Awesome, cool. So this isn't going to be like a super formal thing, just more of a casual conversation for the people that might be curious watching the video. People that might be a little more curious about seeing somebody who is zoo exclusive, someone who themselves is a zoophile and practices it, where I would consider myself a zoophile, but, at the moment, that's not really something that I'm doing. So just for the record, we are both zoophiles. And you're my closest zoo friend and really helped me accept myself. In fact, you made a post on Zooville, and in that particular post, it was about you coming out about things, and you linked an episode of the Zooier Than Thou podcast about coming out. And that just really inspired me to make this video and to like go forward with being more open about it. So, any comment on that?
Oh, I'm just really glad to hear that, and it's always a risk putting yourself out there and telling your story, and my hope has been to help others find acceptance so that they don't blunder through the seemingly endless darkness of denial and repression that so many of us have experienced. And it just makes me sad that some people will never see the end of that. And I'm overwhelmed with joy in your case that I was able to directly help you in that way.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's exceeded my hopes for making that particular post.
Absolutely. I went through a whole lot of mental pains, really just refusing to accept who I was for the longest time. And I mean, I would go through some hard periods going through my teens where I would be really into it and know and accept myself like, yes, I am a zoophile, but there weren't those kinds of resources that really talked about it in an open way and really broke that perception that the mainstream has about zoophilia. So every time that I would kind of come around to it, I would feel so ashamed and alone that I would just lock all of that in and really just curl up into a ball, really. And I know that you kind of went through a similar experience coming out, and you also had a struggle to come to accepting yourself. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, I certainly relate to wanting to curl into a ball and just hide away from all the ugliness that the internet, that comes up on the internet when you search for any sort of these things. And that's definitely been a big struggle of mine, having those feelings and those thoughts over the course of my whole life, and not having any person I felt like I could talk to about or would even beyond just understand and accept, but be able to actually relate to. And I struggled to find myself for many years and struggled with my identity as a result of that. And it sort of all fell into place when I just removed myself from society. I turned off my phone. I went and hiked up a mountain, and I just wrote it all out and admitted it all to myself first. And I looked at it, my whole history with these feelings and these thoughts, and I just said, okay, I accept this. And that was when my world changed. My mate came along not too long after that, and I found this community and found the Zooier the Now podcast. And I'm not going to say that everything's perfect, that I feel 100% okay. It's still a daily work in progress, but it's so much easier to just be at a point where I'm okay and I can look
Absolutely.
myself in the mirror and say it. I'm a zoo, and
Mm-hmm.
my partner is the love of my life, and I love her romantically, physically. That is okay.
I think so too. And it's really amazing to hear how you overcame that struggle and came to that realization and came to accept yourself for who you are. And would you say that you've had to make some sacrifices along the way?
Certainly, sacrifice, that might be a bit of a strong word, at least so far. There's been awkward moments where, like my mom in particular, as any good parent does, just wants to see their kid find someone, be happy. And she set me up with someone to go on a date with. And I liked her, but I didn't. But I had these mixed feelings, and I wanted to be polite, but I didn't. It was just it was really awkward. And so that's what led me to finally come out and say, look, I have someone and I'm happy. Yes, she has four legs, but just to hopefully avoid those kinds of things in the future where, someone else's feelings might be at stake.
Yeah, and to really curb those perceptions, um, you see your mate as like the love of your life, yeah. And what do you both do together for like fun and play and like what's that like? How does that work?
Well, I basically spending time with her is my number one priority. And I wish I could, if I could, I would just spend 100% of my time with her. I'd never work because it's just so much fun. And so I take pleasure in simple things, a walk in the woods. I could do that all day. I love it. And she enjoys those things as well. And just, I try to spend at least a couple hours just being active outdoors with her every day. And I just take pleasure in watching her enjoy herself, even with if it's with another person or with another dog or with me or by herself. So that's a bit of a snapshot of our daily routine. I'm fortunate to live in an area where exercising her is possible,
Mm-hmm.
and I've put myself in a position where I could give her what I imagine to be the best possible life for her that I could provide.
And 100% just clarifying for people, the vast majority of the time that you spend with your mate, it's not like sexual or sexualized. It's just being like a good couple doing normal things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's too early in her life to do those sorts of things really in to that full extent yet. So, and
Yeah,
that's another part of being zoo exclusive is it's an individual adventure. It's not like we have all these role models around us say this is what's right, this is what's wrong. There is
mm-hmm.
obviously you can tell consent yes or no if you can read basic body language, but it's still
Right.
an individual adventure and you get to know your partner and you get to know yourself. And I'm still learning a lot.
That's very true. And yeah, so kind of going off on that leg about, you can tell when they're consensual and such. A lot of people struggle with that because, they don't understand how dogs mature and how zoophiles don't go after like puppies and small dogs and stuff. They just want to perceive us as like evil people who, if we get close to their
Rapists.
dog. Yeah, it's like when we see your dog walking down the street, we're not thinking, "Oh, wow, I want to tap that." Like that's not how it is. And
Well, we can't speak for all of us.
well, I can't speak for all zoophiles, yeah, but I know for me, it's definitely like that, and it's you know, if you're going to be with a dog that is not sexually mature, which is at least like a year and a half, 2 years old for a lot of breeds, it's like a lot of us consider that like pedophilia in a way. If you're doing like intercourse and such, that's just how it is. So I really want to clarify that for the people watching this video that, there are ethical guidelines that people follow.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it is primarily about having that emotional bond, and that's what I've learned through having at least one really meaningful non-sexual romantic attraction to another dog who's belonged to a friend of mine, and that's what really taught me who I am, I would say, was that I
Yeah.
could find that love and that bond without the physical aspect of sex.
And another thing to know, also going along with that kind of romantic but not sexual relationship that you had with your friend's dog, just want to clarify and really help people understand that this isn't about one's personal desires for, sexual gratification or anything like that, but it's pretty much purely about caring about the well being of your mate, of the animals that you love, and it's not about controlling them or forcing them to do sexual acts.
Right. It's the beauty, a true zoo will know it's the beauty of that mutual bond that you find with one another when you're able to communicate on a two-way street.
Exactly. And there's going to be a whole bunch of resources in the description for people who are interested and really want to dig in and kind of understand this stuff. But uh, even like professional dog trainers, they'll masturbate their dogs during training because it
Is
helps
that
them with
right?
yeah, it is because it helps them with stress release and feeling better, and it's used as a training tool. And what's amazing is that with this consensual stuff with a sexually mature animal, people will be all up in arms about that, but they're not against these like breeding. I don't know what you'd call them. They're like facilities where they breed dogs, basically, where they forcefully take semen out of one dog and then forcefully inject it into another, and it's like, how is that
Yeah.
okay? And it's because people view animals as property. They're not viewing them as another living being that deserves the same rights. And that's what really gets me about this whole thing. So,
Right.
yeah,
And that's a huge debate in and of itself, that what artificial insemination and what you mentioned, and yeah, we we could jump down any number of rabbit holes.
for sure. And now you had that post about coming out. Do you want to mention exactly how you came out or who you came out to?
Yes, so I take it coming out as like anything where you have to convey an idea and do it in a thoughtful way that's respectful to, in my case, me and my partner, but also my audience, who in this case was my mom. And I thought a lot about terminology I could use and, potentially getting asked questions and how I was going to handle that. And essentially, I only said I used the word attraction. I didn't use the word
Mm-hmm.
sex or anything like that. I just said I'm attracted to, in this case, I said other species. I left it very wide open.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't, my mom's awesome. She didn't pry me, say, oh, are you screwing your dog? Are you screwing my horses? Blah, blah, blah. She was just like, okay, thank you for telling me. I'm glad that you found someone who you're happy with, and I'm glad this worked out. And that's all I wanted for you, is to just to find someone and be happy. But then she also said, I'm worried about the fact that your partner isn't going to live as long as you, and seeing
Mm-hmm.
you fall apart when she's gone.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
that's a large part of the pain of this orientation, is that many species don't live but a fifth of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I've come out to a couple of my friends, at least I want to say at least five other people, and I've never once had a bad experience with that. And that's not to say it's 100% safe. you got to know your audience and you got to choose your words wisely.
Absolutely. And what's great is that now we have these resources like the Zooier the Now podcast that people can watch and really understand these kinds of nuances about what it means to be a zoophile and how, it's not about the fetishists and the people that are bestialists, where those sorts of things are very antithetical to how we think about our orientation. And what gets me too is that, people treating animals as property and objects like they're stuffed toys basically. And it's like I I would say that addressing their sexual needs helps them relax, lowers their aggression, and overall helps them feel better. And I'm not saying somebody putting themselves onto the animal, because 99% of the time the animal is the one that's initiating that kind of contact. Like, a lot of people might be familiar with like a dog humping their leg, for instance. That dog sees you as a member of the pack or the herd, and that's how they see things. And they're the one that's kind of initiating the action, and overall, it helps them with their wellness and their well being. So, I just wanted to make a quick note of that. It's part of something that I'm reading from the resources section.
Right. Yeah, and it's excellent to have all these resources available nowadays, and I'd encourage anyone who's considering coming out to be prepared to answer questions, help people understand,
Yeah, but
you know, and
also,
yeah, cite examples like this is super helpful.
yeah, and we're not promoting it. We're not trying to force people to be a part of it or anything like that. We're just explaining our orientation and what it means really to be a zoophile. And I think that's what's really beautiful about this conversation that we're having.
Yeah, I'm honored once again to be here and be able to talk about these things openly. I never thought I'd see the day where I could feel comfortable doing this. And I hope it helps others of you
I
out
I
there,
hope
be
so
it whether
too.
you have the same sorts of feelings as us or you're just trying to learn more
Yeah, and
about who we are.
I hope that we have more of a positive kind of response to this video. I know that there's going to be quite a shitstorm, probably caused by me publishing this sort of thing very publicly, but I do hope that people will understand, um, and maybe they're more neutral. They don't want to burn me on a stake, but they also maybe don't fully accept kind of my views. Um, yeah, and that's totally fine. When it comes to the laws and legal and all of that, I really think that people should consider whether or not the animal enjoyed the interaction, not just, the black and white of deciding for that animal that it didn't enjoy it de facto because I said so and that sort of thing. Like, that's kind of my view on that, and that we can't necessarily judge people's morals just from one single thing that they're into or one aspect of themselves, and that's why this might be hard for a lot of people because they're going to see, they know me, they know I'm affectionate and loving and really help people, and then they see, oh, they're also a zoophile. And I really hope that people don't completely judge my morality off of that single aspect of myself. And I hope they don't judge you either.
I hope so too, but like you, I'm prepared for it. It's
Absolutely.
an eventuality that we've incurred potentially,
Mm-hmm.
and risks must be taken, I believe, in order to help others. And I'm glad I took the risk that resulted in helping you out, get to where you are here today.
Thank
And
you.
I wouldn't take it back for any negative comment.
Well, it was good having you here, and um, I'm sure that this has answered a lot of people's questions, gave a little bit more insight on the conversation, and maybe fulfilled those cravings for some people for more information about somebody who actually practices zoophilia and has a mate. So, yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
sounds good.